We're live.
Hey, welcome to our episode on moving to the country. I'll let you in on a little secret. Have you ever heard that song, Moving to the Country, Going to Eat a Lot of Peaches? Well, the secret is there's no peaches growing in Alberta, so we don't have to worry about that. But now that you got that song stuck in your head, we're going to talk about real estate.
So I think everyone knows COVID has seriously impacted the real estate market from a major slowdown last spring to a completely unexpected surge in sales ever since. One of the biggest trends over the last 10 months has been the desire for more space. And along with that, there has been a huge growth in sales of rural properties.
Yeah, and a lot more people working from home, so that's driven people out to the country. Today, we're joined by some amazing agents, Tameka Ross, Lindsay, Parsons, and Allison, Meston, who all have a lot of experience helping people buy and sell acreages near Edmonton.
So we'll get things started by asking questions. If you're watching and you have questions, feel free to post them in the comments and we'll address them. Or even if you're watching the recording, we'll answer the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Ask them some toughies. So we'll get started. So there's a lot of, let's just talk about the reasons why people are moving to the country. Back a year ago, the market kind of hit that, we didn't know what was going to happen through the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, the market picked up and it's been pretty heated ever since. But one trend all across North America is people moving to acreages, moving to rural properties. Ali, tell us why.
I think it's, again, that space factor. Before, a small yard wasn't a big thing, and then playgrounds got shut down, and rec centers that people frequented, they had to have a home gym, which they didn't have space for, and maybe two offices if you're both working from home. So definitely for a little bit of extra breathing room.
And from personal experience, because Allison actually moved to the country earlier this year.
Yeah, you did a whole 180. You were building a house in the middle of Edmonton and then just pulled up stakes and moved to an acreage. And we'll come back to that because we talked earlier about some of the things that even kids who grew up on the farm moving to acreages, but really not knowing how it works. So Tameka, there she is. You dropped out for a second. Tell us what's going on. Why are people moving? And what are some of your insights for people who are thinking of moving to an acreage?
So I think people are moving just kind of what Ali said. It's because they do require more space. Some insights that I think people do need to consider, though, before making that transition is, are the roads completely paved? Are you going to come on gravel roads? Because especially with the recent traction we've been having, obviously there was snow on the ground, so people might not necessarily know if certain roads were paved or not. So I always do kind of warn clients about that because it's not fun come spring. Do you have four-wheel drive if you are not going to be on a paved road all the way in?
I personally believe everyone in Alberta should have four-wheel drive regardless of where you live, but that's another thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there is the fact that we see a lot of people eventually leave acreages once their kids start to drive. So a lot of people don't become comfortable if their children are going to have to make a left-hand turn on a major highway. So it's something that you do want to consider. What side are you buying on?
Yeah, what side of the highway? Actually, that's a really good point. And the other, with regards to the gravel road, I know I've had clients that are car collectors that the gravel has just dinged the crap out of their paint. But
one thing before we go on, Tameka, your video is cut out. I don't know. We can hear you, but your video is frozen. So you might just want to fix with your settings there for a sec.
Okay.
Or maybe we're frozen. I don't know. Anyways, Lindsay, talk to us about some of the technical things that you think people should be aware of if they're moving to the country. Like, what's the big misses that some people just don't know about?
You're responsible for your water and your sewage. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things that maybe people that have grown up in the city would take for granted. If you're on a well system and you have a lot of whites and you do your laundry, they can come out yellow because maybe you have high iron in your well water.
Wow.
Also, you're responsible for your sewage, and there's a lot of different, depending on the size of your yard. There's different types of systems. There's lagoon, there's a mound, there's leaching system, and then for your bigger acreages or farms, I would say, is open discharge. So I think that's the biggest thing, especially with people coming from the city and have grown up in the city. The biggest difference is your water.
Yeah. Where you get your water, what's the quality of the water, what's the flow and refresh rate of it, whether it's a well or cistern, how much is it costing, and how big's the tank? All, I think, really important questions. Tameka, you cut out there, but
you're back.
But you're back.
I'm back. Am I moving now?
Thanks for joining it. Yeah.
You're out of podcast mode.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So Tameka, what are some of the other things people should consider when they're looking at moving to a rural property that you think is important that they don't normally consider?
So some things that some people don't normally consider is school boundary lines. Again, just coming from a mom's perspective, what school are you actually going to be zoned for? Where will the bus pick up your children from?
Right.
Do you even get bus service?
I had to walk about half a kilometer to get to my bus stop as a kid.
And
the really hard part is actually on the Parkland County side, at least, the school map isn't as functional as other school divisions. So it's really hard to tell, like for us, our kids go to a country school, it's called Graminia. And it's really even hard to tell what the Graminia catchment is and who's zoned for Spruce Grove and who's zoned for Graminia. So that's something that you want your agent to be familiar with those boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that could be a big, you're looking at a property thinking, oh, that's the closest school. And then you buy it and then you find out that's not in that catchment.
That's a half an hour bus ride.
They're getting an hour bus ride a day. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so talking about locations, how can people narrow down? There's like so much space all around Edmonton with acreages. How can people narrow down other than just price and size of property, what they're looking for?
I think it depends on, like, obviously at some point you obviously want to get an agent involved. Things that I always ask my clients is, what city do you want to be nearest to? And I'll actually alter their search and kind of zone it in around how far away they actually want to be from a certain city or town. That way they're not out in the boonies, because sometimes, unfortunately, not all agents map their properties correctly. So you might think that you're going to one area and it's actually an extra 30-minute drive that you didn't want to do.
Yeah, it looks like it's in Parkland, but it's near Fort Saskatchewan.
That's just it.
So, Lindsay, what are the main things that you point out to clients when you're showing rural properties?
Well, I think it just depends how big the property is too. I've gone to vacant lots where you can see the whole lot. I've gone to smaller lots that are completely treed and you have to walk the lot to see your perimeter.
Yeah.
And just because there's a fence there does not mean that's the boundary too, because our quarter section, I think we have a fence line that's probably a good 10 feet out. So when you're dealing with a quarter section, you mention that to someone that's from the city, they say, well, that's a lot. Well, not really. Proportionately, it's not too bad. But I think the biggest thing is where do things lie? It's not just the house. It's where your utilities are coming in, where your water is going out. And I always joke, you don't want an open discharge, say, northwest of your home, because the prevailing winds will blow that smell into your house.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Or on someone else's property that's northwest of your home.
Yeah. And just because you're farther away from your neighbors doesn't mean you're not going to have any issues. Stories go up in my head right now.
Me too.
Yeah, that's just part of the joy. I mean, but you have that freedom, you have that space, and Allie, that's what brought you out there. What surprised you when you moved out to the acreage? And in terms of
like that you weren't expecting?
Or just little things that would help people get prepared?
I came from a really tight-knit community in the city, so I was expecting to kind of feel a little lonely and, you know, just really hunker down as a family. And the first day we were here, we were actually burning some cardboard and stuff that previous owners had left behind, and having a fire. And it was all outdoors, and actually most of our neighbors came by with like gifts and said hi. And I didn't know, like, with COVID if that would be a thing. But it was, the sense of community ended up being way more than I expected. So that was a nice surprise.
Great.
And same with the school. The school's really tight knit as well. So they really communicate with parents. When it's not COVID, they have like family dances, and it's just it's a big community out here, which I didn't know.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I was going to move on to what additional costs would you expect when you're buying and or living in the country?
Let's start with you, Tameka.
Well, first and foremost, your inspection is going to cost a little bit more than what you would be used to paying in the city. So that's one cost that automatically comes to my mind.
And that'll depend on what's included in the inspection, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. And then you also have to think about, if you are doing certain types of inspections, are you going to get a septic tank inspection? Sometimes certain inspectors don't cover that. That might be an additional charge if you are going to have somebody come out and do that. Yeah. You also should, if you're on well, get your water tested. There is an additional charge for that.
And it can take a lot longer too, right?
Absolutely. Right now, especially in COVID, I know that I personally take my water tests myself to the lab for my clients, but I am standing in line a lot longer than I ever have before. So it does definitely take a lot longer, and those samples are only good for the same day.
And Lindsay, some of those inspectors, some will do the water analysis or take them in, right?
Yeah, you just have to make sure it's taken in that day. Otherwise,
it doesn't count.
It's a bad test. Yeah. And the thing is too, your mortgage company could require a potable test too, to qualify for that property. So yeah, it's important to know.
That's mostly on the wells, right?
Yeah.
Allison, you had mentioned to me earlier some extra costs as well that you found living on an acreage.
Yeah, I mean, basic stuff like here we're on a cistern. So another cost would be, if you are on a cistern, I would recommend getting it emptied and cleaned. Companies that come around and clean it for you. Think of like a dog water bottle, how it gets like slimy on the inside after like 6 months. So they do recommend every year to have it cleaned, even though it is town water coming.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like, you have to clear your driveway. You have deadfall everywhere. You've got hedges to trim. You're going to need some equipment for that. So, you know, a bobcat, a quad with a blade on it, probably a chainsaw of some sorts. You know, stick with the good brands.
Have you taught your husband how to use the chainsaw yet?
Yeah. We got a leaf blower. That's been really good, actually, just for even the light snowfalls and the snow.
Yeah. So. Awesome.
Yeah. And then you also often garbage collection is not included.
Yeah. So with your taxes in the city, you get waste removal. Some people burn their garbage out here. I find in subdivision, most people don't, because you don't want to have your neighbors have to smell your burning garbage. So there is actually a few companies out here that do a regular weekly or bi-weekly pickup. And ours is weekly. It's about $40 a month. So,
okay, so
I never would have thought of that.
A few added costs. Does anyone want to talk about internet for acreages and rural properties, and what do people need to know?
Oh, good one.
I mean, I've heard they're all not the best, but Allison is here today as living proof that maybe that's wrong. She's live streaming right now because most people do complain about that. I do know that out here in Parkland County, TELUS is now offering more service out here, which is nice. There is ExplorerNet. Rule is out on that one though. So
Starlink is launching as well. I've heard some good things about Starlink.
Okay.
Yeah, so Starlink just launched out here in Parkland. So the people that initially signed up are getting kind of rolled out right now, but there hasn't been any reports on how well it's working. We're on TELUS Hub. My husband did have to beef up the router system, which he's pretty good in techie. So he upped the router and got them to spread throughout our house a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think that's been good. And he also prioritized video calls because we both work from home. So if people are on video calls, everything else kind of gets
shut down.
So talk to Lindsay. Tell me, what are like some of the people that you're working with that are first time moving to acreages? Why are they doing this? Why now? What's going on?
Well, I think when new buyers for acreages have a younger family, I think it's a great fit. I remember myself being a teenager, and I always went to school in the city, and all my friends were there. So I had to get my license pretty fast. Because that's where my social community was, right? Yeah. So I can see younger families, it's a catch, right? Younger families, you're starting out, you may not have that income to buy that acreage that you're dreaming of. And then when you're on the older side, if you're moving out there, then you have to worry about commuting back and forth too, right? Just health and whatnot. But I think the biggest thing is just to get away from the city. I think, you know what, there's a peace and tranquility when you get onto an acreage and it's kind of like you slow down a little bit and you don't have so much noise around you, if that makes sense.
Fair. Anyone else want to talk about what's going on with their clients, what's moving them out to the country?
I think potentially even just having even an outdoor legitimate gathering without your neighbors kind of to sing on you. You might be able to, have a fire more often and just general outdoor lifestyle. I mean, Sarah and Sheldon, you guys have a great lot in the city, but not everybody has a yard that size. And fires and hanging out in your backyard isn't as enjoyable when there's prying eyes.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. What about you, Tameka?
I feel like a lot of my clients are moving because they want to either incorporate like swimming pools, hot tubs, play yards, kind of again, wanting to be outdoors and thinking about, if COVID does happen for a lot longer than we're anticipating, how to ensure that they still have the same lifestyle that they did beforehand. And then there's obviously the big one is always the shop factor. Can I get a shop? Can I get a bigger garage? That's
I was going to bring that up
move.
next because that's obviously a big one. Okay. Yeah, thanks
Everyone's
for
100%.
Thanks for the segue. Since COVID hit, everybody's bought an RV, another quad or whatever. We haven't, but I mean, the sales have been.
You need space to put all that stuff.
You need space to put all that. And parking structures have always been a thing for acreages, shops, closets. Is there anything there you would give people advice on with regards to parking structures?
Get a permit?
Well, we can talk about permits for rural properties too. That's another story.
Something about permits out here. There's this big, people don't get permits because they don't want their taxes to go up. Right. So you hear that a lot. And speaking of taxes, we didn't really touch on this before, but one thing to consider, if you're in subdivision, your taxes are sometimes 1.5 to 2 times higher than if you're out of subdivision. So, general, people don't pull those permits because they don't want the county to know that they've built the shop. It doesn't mean it's not legit and wasn't built by a professional, but that's something that you have to be comfortable with if you're purchasing it.
For sure.
I think the other thing that I am noticing more often in the conversation is a lot of people are wanting to do garage suites out on acreages because they want to have more than one family now coming in. And depending on where you're trying to do that, you really do have to be very careful about that, and making sure that you're even allowed to do that in certain counties, because certain counties definitely have a lot stricter rules, especially if it's out of a subdivision or in a subdivision.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there's one other on that, but I can't remember right now.
Yeah, I always just found that from my clients' perspectives, they just felt the rules didn't apply to them.
Yeah.
So when they wanted to build that secondary, guest house, it was their land. They were going to do it. And so you just have to take extra care to make sure it is built correctly, because it was permitted and generally probably wasn't inspected by the county. And you're right. It's probably done better than what you would get in the city, but just for the reason of taxes, they didn't do it. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think. Did you have something you wanted to add, Tameka?
Sorry. One other point to that is just ensuring that you don't have any restrictive covenants on title, because I've had a couple of people who have called me after buying the acreage. They didn't buy it with me, and then they're upset because they didn't realize all of the rules in place that they can't do, and it was plain and clear on their title.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of having a good agent, is they're going to know that information, the title, what to look for, what's allowed. And they're going to find out from you what you want and are looking for. So that it's important. Yeah.
Well, and if in doubt, just direct the client should be calling the county too, and taking some ownership on that too, because your agent's not going to know all the different rules with the size of lot and then the county as well. So I would strongly recommend people contacting the county.
And with the county too, you can also, they all hold the blueprints for all the homes. So you can usually, if your clients have structural questions or they want to do a massive renovation, you can go, you can't take copies, but you can go view them at the offices. So, I mean, it's nice that they have them on file. You don't get that in the city. So,
no.
Yeah, the ones that they gave them the blueprints.
Yeah,
and that's what they actually do. So before we go, let's just have something that we haven't covered today, a takeaway for people who are thinking of moving to the country.
What's your number one tip that we haven't already discussed?
Your number one tip or insight? Putting you guys on the spot.
I would strongly recommend, when you go out and view with your agent, is make a list of items that the current owner has. Ride 'em tractor, quad with blade, maybe a garden tractor. Maybe they're moving from the acreage to the city. Write them in, because the worst thing they're going to say is no, right? Or you're going to maybe pay a little bit higher in value, but then at least you have these amenities, because you're not going to want to push mow your lawn on a 3-acre spread.
Okay, that brings it to my tip then. My tip is get a goat.
Well, and my thing is goats aren't always that friendly. So.
They fertilize and eat the grass.
Then you got a fence with cage fencing too, so you can't. Yeah,
you gotta have special fencing for goats.
A goat and a donkey to protect it from the coyotes.
Yeah. All right. Also, I would also say that just because you have maybe 10 acres doesn't mean that all 10 acres have to be professionally manicured.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can, poplar grows pretty quick. So just mow what you want to mow and then let the other just, grow
Let
it.
Go.
Yeah, you can always tell a first-time acreage owner when all 3 to 5 acres are manicured. And then year 2, it's like 75% less. And then it's down to 1 acre or whatever. So
those are great tips.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Tameka?
I think my biggest takeaway would be, even though the world has paused right now, people who are considering going out and buying an acreage, they do need to think about what their lifestyle will be like when the world is not going to pause. Do you have children? Are they going to be playing hockey, ringette? How many times do you have to go into the city? What does that look like? Because I don't think necessarily people are thinking sometimes ahead on what life is going to look like when things are unpaused, and are you willing to give up those activities for your kids? something to consider.
Yeah, that's one of the number one reasons that I had clients who moved out to acreages, then moved back, was just
Absolutely.
the amount of
That's my
time they
number one
spent
reason.
driving their kids to their different sporting events and stuff. It was just they ended up in their car the whole time. So, I mean, that is a very good point. I mean, because if you're going to love it, but just be aware of post-COVID for sure. Allie, what about you?
I think this is, advice for in the city and out of the city, but come out on a nice day, go for a walk around, talk to your neighbors. They'll tell you a lot about the house. Like, oh, they've had septic issues for years. They didn't sell in the spring because it's mush out there, and in the fall it's nice and firm. So that's why they listed now. And so you can really hear a lot about your home just from neighborhood chatter. Even if you're out of subdivision, so many people walk the townships and the range roads out here. Just get out and walk and meet the neighbors and dig for a little info.
Right on.
That's great advice.
Well, hey guys, thank you very much for lending your insights and your tips to this edition of Moving to the Country.
And I just wanted to add, if you are thinking of buying or selling, Tameka, Lindsay, and Allison all work rural and urban. So it's, they have a lot of experience representing rural buyers and sellers, but they also work in the city. So.
Absolutely. Great having you guys. Thank you so much for all your expertise today, and take care. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.
Love where you live.
Love where you live.